Alrighty, I think our numbers are slowing down a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, my name is Michael Stewart. I'm here on behalf of the Metadata Working Group to welcome you. I'm going to get us started with an introduction and then hand things over to our first presenter. So hello and welcome to Special Projects in Reparative and Inclusive Description, the third and final workshop in the series Practical Approaches to Reparative Description, hosted by DPLA's Metadata Working Group. We'll begin with some housekeeping items. Please note that the first two sessions of this workshop are being recorded. The last session will not be recorded. Slides will be shared, so you don't need to screenshot any slides. Please put questions for our presenters in the Q&A module. We will try to get as many of those as possible at the end of all of the presentations today. Today's workshop will feature 3 presentations with presenters sharing how they approach description projects for special collections at their universities. Projects include reparative description for Nazi publications identified in the collection, expanding access to electronic agricultural extension reports through non-English language subject headings, and applying content statements and strategies for graphic images and thumbnails. Let me go ahead and introduce our presenters in order. First up is Julie Moore, who is the Special Collections Catalog Librarian at Fresno State University. Julie has been a catalog librarian for over 30 years, specializing in special formats and 3-dimensional objects. Her current research interest is in critical, inclusive, ethical, and reparative cataloging. She was a task force member for OLAC's Best Practices for cataloging DVD, video, and Blu-ray discs, objects, and streaming media and video games, and has written a chapter for the upcoming publication, Inclusive Cataloging, Histories, Context, and Reparative Approaches. Julie is the recipient of the Margaret Mann Citation in 2020 and the OLAC Nancy B. Olson Award in 2010. Vance Woods is the lead cataloger in the Cataloging and Government Documents Unit at the Oregon State University Libraries and Press. Vance has a master's degree in Church State Studies from Baylor University in Texas, with a focus on medieval Celtic history in the British Isles. He started as a special collections cataloger at Baylor in 2009, moving to Oregon State University in 2017 after an interim period in Argentina, where he grew up. He has extensive experience with original cataloging in many different formats, both physical and electronic, including rare and unique materials. He is an expert in languages and is fascinated by linguistics in the bibliographic field. He has published in both scholarly and popular contexts, including a photographic history of Bates County, Missouri, his family's ancestral home. Devin Murphy is a metadata and digital collections professional currently working as the metadata analyst at the University of Texas at Austin. In this role, Murphy oversees standards, policies, and data models for the library's holdings. Murphy previously worked as the metadata librarian for Latin American resources and as the Tarot metadata analyst at UT Austin and as a Getty graduate intern from 2019 to 2020, creating Getty vocabulary records and policies. Murphy received dual master's degrees in art history and information science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2019, examining information systems in art museums, including cataloging of Cherokee baskets by Native and non-Native institutions. And Karina Sanchez serves as the Scholars Lab librarian at the University of Texas at Austin, where she is committed to advancing innovative digital scholarship research. In her previous role as a diversity resident librarian at UT Austin, she devoted time to developing workflows to improve the process of displaying and managing harmful content in libraries and special collections. Welcome to all of our presenters, and I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to our first presenter, Julie Moore.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. My name is Julie Moore, and I'm the Special Collections Catalog Librarian here at Fresno State. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my academic background is in anthropology, German, and computer science. I earned my MLS from the University of South Florida, and today we're here to discuss some of the reparative cataloging that we have been working on regarding books about Nazism. First of all, I'd like to point out our Fresno State land acknowledgement. I'm grateful to live and work in the traditional homelands of the Yokuts and Mono peoples. A little background, you might wonder why we have Nazi books. Um, it was discovered that our former university librarian, Henry Miller Madden, was a Nazi sympathizer. And the university president formed a task force to investigate, and they found out this was true. They published their report in May of 2022, and the Madden name was removed from our library building. Henry Madden served as the university librarian from 49 to 79, so for 30 years. And he died in 1982. He was a scholar and a bibliophile and a Germanophile. And he grew our library's collection from 70,000 books to 576,000 books on a wide range of subjects. And after he died, his papers and personal book collection were donated to Fresno State Special Collections and Archives. And those papers were sealed for 25 years as per the official gift agreement. And once open, they were described using DAX at the folder level. So I received a Provost Award for research, and this was to help me look into and research the collections for any books related to Nazis and Nazism. We hired Ben Nehring to help research with this project, and he's a graduate student in history who has a second language skills in German. So we spent most of our time looking at the Madden collection on German travelers in California. And I should mention that Fresno State is in a shared catalog with all 23 campuses of the California State University libraries. So we are putting most of our information in local fields with our local practices. So for this particular collection, we always add a gift note and a provenance note and a local collection title and a link to what we call a snippet. This makes for a thumbnail picture that shows up in Primo, our discovery layer that you can click on to get to the digital book plate. The Madden collection, with the Madden collection, I asked Ben to identify books that were by or about Nazi Party or Nazi members, potentially looted books by Nazis, items of interest, and definitive ties. And after many, many hours of combing through this collection, just a few titles seem to have Nazi ties. And these books were mainly just travel journals, and they were typical of the period and mainly written for Germans. And here's our digital book plate that's dedicated to this collection. We did change the description a bit to kind of explain what the books were. And we also let people know that Dr. Madden was found to be a Nazi sympathizer. Plus, we provided a link to the final report and the finding aid guide to the Madden papers. So we moved to a different area of the special collections that held some of Madden's acquisitions. Now, Madden traveled to Germany often and was known to send back many boxes of books. However, identifying the books that he sent and had obtained for the library was very challenging. And it was a little suspicious because Madden kept extensive records on almost everything except in the case of these books. So provenance is very difficult to establish with these books. Some of the books, however, are a little more obvious, like these. When you have a Nazi eagle on the cover, you might just have a Nazi book. And when you flip through the pages and you see things like this, you probably have a Nazi book. So one of the here. One of the books that I want to hone in on is this book here. The title is Bayern im ersten Vierjahresplan. And this is a very good example because there are a number of reparative issues that can be highlighted. In this presentation, I'm going to run through 10 issues or areas that I repaired. So one thing that's very easy to do is adding a contents note. And then also adding a summary note. I added a summary note in English. Both the contents note and the summary note, the beauty of those is that they're keyword searchable, usually depending on how you have set up your system. Now, the aboutness and the subject headings, that's always a sticking point, isn't it? Now, these were, unlike the image that you see over to the right, um, where I have superimposed Nazi symbols on the books, our Nazi books just look like any other old book on the shelves. And even the subject headings do not provide even the slightest hint that this might be a Nazi book. These were the only three very plain LCSHs that were in this book. So this book really is about the impact of Nazism on Bavaria. So I brought Bavaria forward. And so I added these subject headings to the record. You might want to note that the word Nazi or Nazism is not a Library of Congress subject heading. So the only possibility is the German name. But here in Fresno, it is very highly unlikely that most of our students would search by Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. So I needed a workaround. And since researchers I figured would probably use Nazi or Nazism, in searching for this, I also added the following GSSO, which is gender, sex, and sexual orientation ontology terms. This ontology has been okayed through our chain of command to allow its use, other than LCSH. So I added the subject headings for Nazi Germany and Nazism. The fourth area is creator. Um, this book is not only about the Nazi Party, but it's also by the Nazi Party. So I added a 610 for, and also a 710 to reflect that. Now, addressing Nazi propaganda, I decided to add the genre term, it's an LCSH, Nazi propaganda. And looking back on it, I probably could have stopped there. And actually, I probably should have stopped there. But the RBMS vocabularies gave me a couple of words that I thought might be good to use. So I threw in Nazi works and propaganda. Now, the publication information is interesting. I added an authorized corporate body heading for France Air Nachfolger. And I also added the clarifying general local note that France Air Nachfolger was the central publishing house of the Nazi Party. And I also added the creator characteristics note from the LC demographic group terms, Nazis, and subfield 2 LCBGT. There were other characteristics of this book that were kind of interesting. There's the Nazi eagle clutching the swastika symbol that's on the front cover in gold. There are a couple of Nazi censor stamps on the title page, and it's in Fraktur, Fraktur script. And these interesting characteristics fold nicely into notes. You can put the golden or gilt Nazi eagle into a 563 field. There are local notes that we put in for the censor stamps. And I really wanted to bring out that Fraktur, so I added a 546 field. I also did some minor cleanup. This was an old record. I actually decided to move the Denkschrift part, which is memorandum by the Bavarian state government on March 9th, 1937. I moved that from being a subfield B to a subfield C for the statement of responsibility. I also changed it from AACR2 to RDA and added an 041 to show that the text is in German and that it's not a translation. Now, Ben did some amazing cross-checking with Nazi looter lists. In this cross-checking, Ben found that some of the materials were from dealers and auction houses well known to be Nazi looters. Let's take the Dorotheum, for example. We have a number of books that came from the Dorotheum. We created the source of acquisition note in the 591, and then made the 590 a general information local note that kind of explains that Dr. Madden obtained this copy from Dr. Hans Herbst, and Herbst's name is reported on this ALIU report name index. And so it provides a little context for the user if they look at it. I also have a suggested reading for you if you want. Also, the call number, call numbers can be very subjective. different catalogers will place things together using their own judgment. The original cataloger matched the LCSH, kind of blasé. I decided to relocate the book more into German history with the Nazis to keep the Nazi stuff together. Now, in special collections, you might have heard that this year we've had 2 cataloging exhibitions, one of which is called Words Matter. The inclusive cataloging movement takes flight. And here you can see our display case that shows the reparative work that we've been doing on some of these Nazi books. And I'm about out of time, so I just want to fly by these exhibition photos. You can look at them later. This is what our reading room looks like right now. It's only up for 1 more week, so if you're in Fresno, stop by. But if you're not, we have a lot of this in online representation. So for both Words Matter and Unseen Labor. So please stop by and look at it virtually. And then I have a couple of pages of additional resources that you can look through later. And I just wanted to thank my special collections team for all of this. If it, you know, if it weren't for them and their support, I wouldn't be able to do this important work that we've been doing. And that is it for me.
So, as was mentioned in the introduction, I was raised in Argentina. My family moved there when I was 10 years old, and I spent all of my teenage years there. And I am now 1/4 of a mixed family. My wife and daughters are all 3 Argentine nationals. So I have a very rich background with the Spanish language. And it is actually the language of choice, at least for my wife and myself in our home. Our daughters have not quite decided which one is theirs, which makes for some very interesting multilinguality here. We often aren't sure what language we're speaking. But that is how I basically got my introduction to the world of languages. When I started at Baylor in 2009, I began working with the Keston Collection, which is a collection of materials from the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, covering any number of subjects, religion, sociology, political history, things like that, a great majority of which were in Cyrillic or Cyrillic-related scripts. And the ones that weren't in Cyrillic or Cyrillic-related scripts were often in other Eastern European languages, Western European languages. So pretty much everything represented, and so it was kind of a baptism by fire as far as learning to manipulate any number of different languages within bibliographic records. And that basically created in me this love for language in the bibliographic context, which I continue to pursue today. So my basic premise is that multilingual subject analysis is an expression of DEI, that we cannot be truly inclusive unless we look to that part of the issue. So I'm going to go to Ranganathan very quickly. Every reader, his, her, their book, but we also have to remember that each reader has his, her, or their language. Every book has its reader, but each book is in a particular language. These are things that I think sometimes get lost in translation, forgive the pun. And that brings me to rule number 4, save the time of the reader, which in my mind is make things easy on the reader who is seeking information. And if I translate that, this is, as I say, the law number 4 according to DEI, according to Vance, really boils down to honoring the reader's whole identity. And this includes language. We do this already in any number of ways. We have harmful content notes in archival materials to shield readers from unexpected trauma. the transliteration of non-Latin scripts, and then the inclusion of the non-Latin script. I had a friend at Baylor who was from Russia, who was very frustrated with our catalog there because we did not include the Cyrillic in our bibliographic records. And for a Russian native speaker, transliteration is not the boon that it might be for those of us who are not. They're not used to making that leap in their minds, and so it's much more difficult for them to find the materials than we think it is when it doesn't appear in their native script. The implementation of Homosaurus as a source of vocabulary for bibliographic records, same basic principle, allowing readers to find materials according to the terms most related to who they are. And so to me, providing access to titles by way of non-English subject headings, it's simply an extension of this effort. Now, why it's important here at Oregon State University, we are in the midst of a brand new strategic plan, which is called Prosperity Widely Shared. The library decided that we were going to form working groups to basically create our strategic plan along the same lines as the university strategic plan. The third goal of the university strategic plan is a university that fuels a thriving world. And so when we get into the world, we're surrounded by languages. And it's not just us, right? It's not just the English speakers who tend to dominate the subject heading world in the United States, at least. And oddly, even in some other countries, I've had conversations with catalogers in Argentina who tell me that they tend to defer to LCSH when it comes to establishing their subject headings. Currently, 60.4% of the top 10 million websites are in English, but English speakers only represent 16% of the global population. UNESCO has stated that of the 7,000 languages present today, only 5% of those are online. A very interesting article by someone named Andras Kornai called Digital Language Death, which basically suggests that this default to English and other major world languages as means for searching things and interacting digitally online tends to actually lead to language death because people tend to abandon their own languages in favor of the languages that will get them results online. And it's a very interesting comparison that this author makes. Evidently, what we are witnessing is not just a massive die-off of the world's languages, it is the final act of the Neolithic Revolution, with the urban agriculturalists moving on to a different digital plane of existence, leaving the hunter-gatherers and nomad pastoralists behind. So this is a global social justice issue to me. I first came across this in the context of working with OSU extension publications. And as you can see from the slide here, 15.28% of Oregon residents speak languages other than English. And of those, the majority of the minority, 8.87% are Spanish speakers. And these extension publications are by definition not intended just for university people. They're extension publications. They're intended for everyone. And I discovered, much to my chagrin, that while we have many of these extension publications specifically translated into Spanish for Spanish speakers in Oregon and beyond, presumably, almost none of the records that existed had Spanish language subject headings in them. So we have these things for people who speak this language, but we don't give them access to them in the language that they speak. Now, the good thing about this is that most, if not all, extension publication cataloging at OSU involves original cataloging, which gives me, as the cataloger, means, motive, and opportunity for doing what I have been doing. So I started poking around a bit, and I began fiddling with Spanish language subject headings. A few years ago, I took a course, a rare books cataloging course with one of the major library associations in Spain. And while doing that, I spent quite a bit of time in what would basically amount to their class web, their vocabulary lists, learning how to apply these in their records. And so I began to apply them in our records. Very slowly at first, and there aren't a ton of these things, so it was kind of a clandestine effort on my part, just to see what I could do. And then, in September of 2023, the former director of our library out at Gwynn, which is on the coast, acquired about 20 children's books that were both in Spanish and bilingual. And between her and a few of the other people working out there, they decided to ask if we could upgrade these records so that they also included the Spanish language subject headings, among other things. They wanted Spanish summaries and Spanish language notes and things like that as well. So we covered that too, but this gave me an officially sanctioned opportunity to begin looking more into this. And it just kind of took off from there. This is one of the records that I worked on. As you can see, I've added a second 546 for language in Spanish. There is a 520 summary note in Spanish, which I believe I ripped off of the publisher's website because it was not in the record before. And then the 650 blank 7 subject headings. There's also a 655. No, I take that back. There is not a 655. There's also the 650 blank 1 children's subject heading for Spanish language materials. And you can see the coding that goes into this, the subfield 0s and the subfield 2s to indicate source of vocabulary and then to provide an identifier, because something very interesting happened. And so I'm a cataloger. We have Alma Primo here. We catalog in Alma. People see it in Primo. I see everything in Alma, and therefore I tend to forget that there is a public view that is not mine. And I just stumbled. So this is a project that started in September 2023, right? And about 3 weeks ago, as I was preparing for this presentation, it occurred to me that I might want to check and see. And I did. And as it turns out, none of these subject headings were visible in our public view. The facets were there, so they were searchable, but they weren't visible. And so at the moment, I and my unit manager are working with one of our library IT folks to get that fixed so that these will show up in the display. The facets are there, so they're searchable, but the visibility allows for cross-referencing. So I think that's an important step. And so we are working on that. But just a note to say that we often as catalogers forget that we don't see necessarily what the public is seeing. I get questions all the time from people who say, why isn't this showing up? And I'm staring at my Alma record and thinking, but it's right there. And then it clicks and I go to the public view and I realize what they're talking about. So it's an important step, and it's one that I overlook. So the things that I use to do this, there is a very interesting website, lcsh-es.org, which is basically a prototype for a shared bilingual authority file. You can type English terminology into this engine, basically, and it translates it for you into the subject headings used by various different organizations. The National Library of Spain vocabulary is in there. There's the Bilingual Index. The Queensborough Public Libraries in New York have their own vocabulary list, and it will give you the terms and it will give you the coding that should go with the terms, or at least the source of the terms, so you can find the coding in the LC subject heading and term source codes. And then there's also a very lovely searchable authorities website for the National Library of Spain. The prototype, the LCSH-ES, is a little outdated. It was made in 2007, and as we all know, controlled vocabularies are updated and changed constantly. So while the search for the National Library of Spain in their search engine is in Spanish, once you have that terminology from the bilingual engine, you can go into the National Library of Spain. And this works, I think, even for people who aren't bilingual in Spanish. You can look up the subject headings and it will hopefully provide you with something that you can use. And then the LC subject heading and term source codes, which I absolutely adore because it gives me access to vocabularies from all over the world. But I have titled this presentation Multilingual Subject Analysis as an expression of DEI in cataloging. And so far, I've spoken about English and I've spoken about Spanish. So we're at bilingual, but we're not quite at multilingual. So in my own personal fantasy world, I would like to see a time in which we have subject headings in all different languages for all different materials, all displaying so that people can see them, can cross-reference them. There are several challenges that go into this. As we all know, this requires special expertise above and beyond cataloging. It's one thing to train people on the rules for RDA. It's another thing to train people on entire languages and get them to bilingual status so that they can not just find the subject headings, but determine whether they're actually applicable. And then there's policies that are in need for addressing when and where to apply these non-English subject headings. So do we do them in all the books? Do we put Spanish language subject headings on Spanish language books and French on French and German on German? Is there any crossover? And then also, what is our public, right? Here at OSU, the latest numbers, enrollment numbers, and this is based on country of origin, so there's a bit of extrapolation on my part here. But in our situation, Spanish is important. We have 92 people enrolled from Spanish-speaking countries, but it's not the most important. We have 440 students enrolled from Chinese-speaking parts of the world, 307 from Arabic and other Middle Eastern language-speaking parts of the world, and then there's further Korean speakers, Japanese speakers, Portuguese speakers, Thai, any number of different things. So you look at your university, you look at your town where your public library is, and you decide what public do we have and what really needs to be focused on. So I've been doing Spanish language subject headings, but as you can see from our numbers, it may not be the most important thing we could be doing here. But there is potential. Expertise is often hidden and it's often local. We don't often know every aspect of our catalogers' lives. There may be people that have language expertise that we don't even know they have, and we can leverage that. And we also live in a highly automated, interlinked world, and cataloging is heading that way. I don't fully understand linked data, but I do know that it is quite promising when it comes to things like this. The National Library of Spain, authority search, that will connect you to identifiers from LC. It'll connect you to identifiers from vocabularies from France. There are ways to cross-reference this, even if we don't necessarily have like bilingual language expertise. And the most important thing is, don't reinvent the wheel. See, I started looking at this in terms of grandiose ideas like apps that can translate everything, or AI, leveraging that. You know, everybody talks about that these days. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think there is potential. But then one of my colleagues, in a conversation we were having about our strategic plan, pointed out to me, and I should have thought of this, and I just didn't, but Kevin Jones points out to me that we are surrounded by non-English language of cataloging records. We are not allowed to use those by the policies of the Alliance, the Orbis Cascade Alliance, but they're full of subject headings in other languages that were input by catalogers from those countries who speak those languages. They have the coding and everything, and so they're there, and we can use them, and I say, why not? So there are many possibilities out there. The more linked we get, the better it becomes. Although I did hear a very interesting webinar just the other day, person talking about African languages and how they interact with things like AI and online searching and things like that. And the suggestion was made there that the better the AI gets, the more it tends to become monolingualized, and the less useful it may potentially be to people with other languages. So we have to be careful with that as well. And I leave you with a quote from my favorite magical headmaster. This is a huge project, right? And it does kind of exist inside my head at this point. But as I've pointed out, it's not a project I have to do on my own. It's a project that everyone is, even if they don't know it, working on right now. One of the subject headings that I input early on in the work that I did has been now enhanced with the appropriate coding for visibility by a completely different library. They don't know me, I don't know them, but we're both working on the same thing at the same time. So it's not as big of a project as we might think. We can insist that one person assemble a 5,000 piece puzzle, or we can allow 5,000 people to use one piece to assemble the same puzzle, and it becomes a much, much more manageable project. So my idea in my head is basically this. This is where I want to get. And I think that we're on our way there, and I think it's a much more manageable project than we think it is when we look at it with a terribly broad view. Thank you very much.